in response to the wolves. And the reason was that the regenerating forests stabilized the banks so that they collapsed less often, so that the rivers became more fixed in their course. Similarly, by driving the deer out of some places and the vegetation recovering on the valley sides, there was less soil erosion because the vegetation stabilized that as well. So the wolves, small in number, transform not just the ecosystem of the Yellowstone National Park, this huge area of land, but also its physical geography.
Yay! That video always makes me so very happy. So, so just a little bit more background about that video. So Anna and I both are studying with a shaman named Francis Rico, and he played this video for us in our applying shamanism class as both as an inspiration, but also in the sense that as we cultivate our own feral nature, our own inner wildness, that we're like those wolves, that we come in and we can help transform the ecosystem and create far-reaching effects. So I wanted to play this at the beginning, both just as a overarching framework, but also as an inspiration. So, and then here, hold on. I don't hear an echo. Does anyone else hear an echo? No, no echo from Anne. Rod, do you hear an echo? Nope. Okay, so I'm not sure, Michelle, what to do, but I have me on headsets because I thought the sound would be better. So, but here I can try without headsets if you want to see. Okay. So, so our first question is, sorry, got to move this out of the way. So what can we do as OD practitioners and global citizens to improve our response to the climate crises and climate change overall? So, and this is where whoever, okay, so sometimes, and maybe just because of internet connection, that's someone else. Are they saying they're having an echo? And whoever Inspiron is? I don't know who Inspiron is. So, but so, hi Lakshmi. Okay. So whoever would like to start with that, and I'll try, I can take my headset off and see if that stops the echo too, for those who have echo, so.
Okay, I will start. In our book, Practicing Organization Development, we asked all authors to please address the climate issue overall. Well, maybe half did, but I do believe that we as OD professionals need to be very responsible and integrate into everything we do climate change. And we are doing that in the Philippines.
And how are you doing that in the Philippines? What are the actions you're taking with that?
It's still to be developed. It's just starting. The mission is to the SKR Foundation. He's the founder of American Express in Europe and the chairman of the board in Europe, 92-year-old financial leader of the world. And our mission is to eliminate poverty in the Philippines and to transform it. And of course, when you speak of the word transformation of a country, it must include climate change. And yes, it's 250 communities.
250 communities in the Philippines?
Yes, like states, 250. And we'll be working on governments identified the 40 poorest states. That's where we'll start.
Well, and how about, so for like Michelle, I know that you'd been talking about how in South Africa, there'd been an area where they'd run out of water, or where so basically like people were realizing that the climate change issues were affecting them directly, like in the sense it wasn't just like a distant thing as well. So I'm feeling like the more that people realize that the climate change is actually happening right now, that there's more interest in incorporating it, like you're talking about, Stan, right? Like actually having backing and funding and that kind of thing. So is anyone else seeing that in their country or in their work, that there's more interest to specifically include it or to have funding for it?
Yes, certainly I'm seeing it a lot here in Australia, which is about high time it began to be more part of serious discussion at the highest levels. But yes, quite practically, a quick example, I was working with a team of executives last week of a company, and they had someone from investment banking there advising them how to prepare their company over the next 2 years for it to be sold. And I was the OD type person in the room, so I asked some questions about people and about what sort of a social citizen this company was, and whether this banker thought that was at all important for those who were going to be investing money to buy this company or going somewhere to borrow money to buy this company. And he very clearly said that you just can't get money, you can't get funding to buy certain industries anymore. So, for example, he spoke of thermal coal mines as being something that you just wouldn't be able to get money to invest in very easily anymore. So that was interesting, having those conversations in those sorts of environments puts that right on the radar, becomes part of the agenda, and those companies start to consider, initially perhaps purely from an economical and financial viewpoint, to what extent are we exposed because we're involved in industries that are contributing to climate change, and how do we change and innovate and get out of those. So that's quite interesting how widespread that is now.
Oh, yeah, definitely. That's very interesting. Well, and Michelle, I'm curious, when you had mentioned that state or that town that had run out of water, this is the kind of thing for me where the sense of, as it's really starting to impact at the local level, the larger governmental levels, how OD responds to that. Like how do they take those topics and then be able to bring them in so that the decision makers or the people involved see that this is the time to act and they have the leverage. So that's part of, like, when I hear what you say, Rod, right? The sense of they're actually listening on this larger level. Ooh, looks like Rod is frozen. Oh, you're back. Okay. So that's the thing for me. See, where Ann and I live in Montana in the States, where it's quite wild and more remote. It's not, there's a lot of resources. There's a sense that climate change is distant on a certain level, right? So where I feel like, yeah, Ann? Yes?
Yeah, I was just going to say, we live in a state that is filled with resources. We have coal, oil, precious metals, it's very difficult to bring up these issues. I work with a lot of different organizations, and I'm really interested. Like, I now am able to broach about digital transformation in organizations, but I haven't done environmental at all yet. And so to me, it's really interesting because it's just so embedded where we are. I don't even know how to bring that up. So I would welcome anybody's suggestions on how to do that.
Yeah, I mean, maybe just from our side. So yeah, where I was for Christmas, where my brother is, they basically ran out of water over Christmas. And but Cape Town, which is a big city, more than 3 million people, got very close to running out of water. And it made it part of the conversation, I guess, that ordinary people were saying, you know, things run out. You know, things are not going to be there forever. And so it also started making people think about other issues. I mean, not everyone, but certainly the general conversation was more, you know, why are we just throwing stuff into the sea, for example? Even young people saying this is unacceptable. So it allowed it to be in the, you know, general conversation in organizations and on the street, which I think then slowly practitioners are saying, okay, this is something we can bring up, and how, and also how do we use this opportunity to bring people together rather than polarize as well, because there's a danger that people start retreating into privilege and who has and who doesn't have in a moment like this.
Yeah, that's a really great point. Well, and that's part of why when you said that to me, it really stood out to me, because talk about making something real. Running out of water in a city, that's like, wow, right? You know, and similarly, the fires in Australia, again, there's just the sense, and like Anne was saying, where we are, there's not a sense of urgency, you know, or that you need to act, right? And so it's an interesting thing to see and to be with. No, this needs to be brought up now, because by the time you would wait to bring it up, it's going to be much more dramatic, right? So, and I apologize, I don't know how to pronounce your name, if it's Vadivu. So I apologize in advance or if your entire name is Vadivu Govind, where you say starting with ourselves through our own personal example, right? So changing the way we do things in organizations. So, and again, I mean, that's, I'm a big believer in that as well. So this is something for me where, so my work has mostly a tremendous amount of change, and it's been very energy based, and it's been something where it took me into a lot of different realms. It's just started in the past several years, has crossed over with OD. I've been working with Anne Clancy for five or 6 years now, coaching. And so I've come into OD through this sense of changing truly self as instrument. And then I'm finding myself engaging with the larger group as people are looking at it. So I very much agree with the sense you have to begin here. And I guess as well, being willing to speak up about these things too, you know, and perhaps have difficult conversations, and like Michelle, like what you're saying, not polarize, but even, I mean, Anne, can you imagine bringing up talking about water, like conserving water? They just, where we live, it's very conservative in that way. So is there any other thoughts on how OD practitioners can bring this into their work or introduce it into where they're working? Because if not, we have our second question. So
yeah, maybe I'll come in. This is Karen here. I'm also in Cape Town.
hello.
And Michelle invited me, and so I wasn't part of the conference. And I'm not going to show my video because we had what's called load shedding, which is another interesting. I'm also in Cape Town, and it's another interesting experience, which is 2 hours at a time. Cape Town gets cut with electricity. So when I joined this call, it was dark. So I'm in my pajamas and really crazy hair and all of that. I'm not going to show my face right now. But I think what I'm particularly interested in this conversation is not so much trying to convince people about climate change, you know, or get people to act, which is really important. For me, my growing interest is how to support those that are really, especially change agents who are suffering under the personal impact of climate change. So people who, you know, I can imagine, and I've spoken to a lot of friends and colleagues in Australia for whom the fires in Australia have been deeply traumatic. And so how to help, you know, people who already are convinced and are suffering under the weight and the overwhelm to process it. So I think there are two things, you know, and that's obviously in the climate change space. You've got the mitigation, which is trying to stop or curtail what's happening, and then the other side is how do we adapt. So I just wanted to bring that part into the conversation.
That's wonderful. Thank you. I appreciate it.
My comment, Ed, if I may make it, is simply the forest fires thing is all over. Singularity University has said that in 3 years or 4 years, they will have the drones and a fire in any forest potential area will be put out in about 10 minutes. So it's going to be so there's hope. Amen.
Thank you, Stan. You know, Karen, Michelle had shared a resource with me that I think I really appreciate. I was reading this woman's paper about sustaining responsibility of change agents by Karen Goldberg, and it's about climate grief as well, like her work with climate grief and how to be resilient in the face of this kind of deeply distressful, basically actually opening yourself to the reality of what's happening and how to process it. And that's a resource that we can share with you as well if you're not familiar with it. But one of the things, and there's also another one, Standing at the Edge by Roshi Joan Halifax, about basically how to be open to all of the suffering, but at the same time, how to take care of yourself at the same time, right? And I do feel like in my personal work, so much of the transformation, I've had to learn this just on my own, but when I was reading this paper, and she was talking about the key themes that she discovered, I thought it was really, really excellent, like addressing rather than avoiding emotional distress and discomfort, being connected with others and having emotional support. And she was also talking about how realizing that facing into the feelings actually created the movement that actually gave her more energy and made her want to engage more. So are you familiar with that paper? Are you actually the person who wrote that paper? Because you're the person who wrote that paper.
I am actually the person who wrote it.
Brilliant. Okay, good. Because I was like, what's the chance that there's a Karen Goldberg there? Okay. So Karen, specifically from my own experience in Qigong, I've been practicing Qigong for 18 years. And yeah, I've just been involved a lot in the energy arts, and everything you were describing is exactly what I've seen in Qigong world and in energy practices. And when you're really moving toxins through the lymphatic system, and it was so interesting to me what you wrote, where I was like, that's exactly what I discovered in my own practice as well, you know? So that for me is also a personal interest of how to help people understand how to cultivate this kind of resiliency so they can go in and out of the light and the dark, like you showed in your paper. So have you had a chance to actually teach that to people yet? Have you created workshops?
No, so yeah, thanks for that, and Michelle, thanks for passing it on. It's funny, you just never know what, you know, when you write something, where it actually goes. So I did my master's in 2010. So I think I was a little bit, not quite ahead of the curve, or not before my time, but it was not mainstream like it is now. In the discourse. And when I finished my master's, it really, this process really helped me. You know, I am in my life, and I'm doing the work that I'm doing now largely. I mean, it really was a lifesaver. And I kind of left that behind for a few years, and it's really just been this year, towards the end of last year, that it kind of came up again, and I just put out a LinkedIn post, and that's actually how Michelle and I connected, and that's why I'm on this call, because it just feels like actually there's a need for it, and I haven't really thought how to, you know, I hadn't thought how to package it into something that would be actively useful for people, and that's really the journey that I'm on now, is to see how I can be part of that conversation, or part of creating processes that can be supportive for people. So it's a very very open exploratory question for me, is because writing something down like that and the personal experience and translating it into an experiential embodied process, there's quite a journey to that.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So yeah, so to say I'm just looking how I can help really. You know, based on the experiences I have, it's not for everyone, but I think there was something that certainly helped me. So I'm imagining it can be supportive for others.
Well, first of all, I'm so glad you're here, and I also just think it's truly hilarious. So I'm like, oh, there's this resource. Oh wait, you wrote the resource. So just the sheer moment of humor for the world and the smallness of the world. But also, you know, this is something that Anne and I in our work together, what I've brought in our collaboration, I bring the embodiment aspect as well as more of the spiritual training. And then she's bringing the more theoretical applied research. And I feel like this place where they meet this is part of what I saw in your paper, the sense of being able to actually recognize if one is going to face that level of breakthrough, the reality that your system is going to have to upgrade. Your neurology is going to have to upgrade. If you're going to actually look at and interact with this level of intensity. And I feel like you really got that really well. So I highly encourage you to keep answering that question. So yeah, I'm very, and I feel like as well, and you know, I'd love to hear from all of you as well. I know for me that I deeply believe in life in the sense of, and again, this is from the training that Anne and I share with Francis Rico, saying yes to life and saying, all right, I'm willing to be part of the solution. What do you need to do through me as me? Right? So, and there's a sense of really opening up to that. And for me, I can't just personally, I can't separate out the sense of engaging with life as a spiritual action from it. It's not separate. And that makes me wonder as well, just in the sense of what motivates us all to do what we're doing and how we can lean into that motivation, you know, and how we can, and that actually brings us happily to one of our next questions. So so just as we started, how can we help people and systems get out of crisis and panic mode and into possibility mode and creative problem solving, right? And how do we help people deal with climate grief? I know Michelle's been putting things in the chat, and Jen Wilson in the States is also working on this. So, and that's where I feel like what Karen addressed in her paper and what seems to be coming back for her. Because when I look at the fires in Australia, Rod, and I feel into all that loss of life, that's a lot of emotion to feel. And I'm not even in the continent. I'm just at a distance. So, I mean, what has your experience been? Or what have you seen over this time in Australia over the past couple months?
We've got a couple of other Aussies online, so
okay,
they must feel free to jump in. But I live in the city, but have friends who don't, and so there's a sense of what I was experiencing was the smoke, and then, as you say, the emotional side of what was happening to so many people, to so many millions and millions of acres of forest, and to what some people are suggesting may be 500 million to 1 billion animals that were killed. So the figures are quite startling. And the being relatively close to that and having it part of what we were all talking about for a long time was, it certainly does affect the emotions. It certainly brought people's focus into caring for people, which Aussies do pretty well. and there's so many wonderful stories in the small towns and villages, and of amazing things done. And the world seems to have observed and watched as well what's been happening here. We've had people from Syria donating money, which is almost embarrassing, but it's quite overwhelming. I think, you know, there are people who've been deeply affected by what's happened, and they've got a long journey ahead. And one hopes that the attention and the needs that they have would not now be forgotten because the drama is no longer on our TV screens. So there's that side that's a concern. And then the other concern is that a single, albeit massive event like this does create a lot of attention. And so these moments do start and galvanize and energize movements, which is interesting. But I'm also concerned that people do see a wider, longer term big picture. So if next year there's not as many fires because things are slightly cooler or there's not much left to burn, people don't say, oh, you see, it's not much of a crisis, really. So the danger of pointing to a single event is always a problem. Like the American senators a few years ago who came into, you know, with holding a ball of snow saying, see, the country's not warming. That kind of, you know, single event thing is dangerous. But certainly there's been a shift here in many spheres of our life, and the discussion is where it's starting to get to where it should be. But yeah, I think there's, as you say, there's a real deep personal, emotional effect and a need for that to develop and change in us. There's us acting as individuals in our society and organizations, and there's us also doing work on the bigger systems that can have a bigger effect, and it's all worth doing. You know, it's valuable to work on ourselves. It's valuable for us to do small things, and it's important for us to do the big things, or to try to change some of the systems.
Yeah. So, hello, Rod. This is Sally from Melbourne, and I haven't got my picture.
Hi, Sally.
Hi. How are you doing?
Okay.
So I think what I want to say is I live in Melbourne, and so I have the perspective of coaching Victorian government leaders at the moment, and 40 of them. So I have a perspective of what's happening at a government level, and I also have a perspective of just no one is unaffected. No one. Like, I can't, or I don't start any process, whether it's coaching or mediation or facilitation, without checking in as to how people are, because there'll be some way that the person's been impacted. It'll be a family member, it'll be the smoke, or they will have had a holiday house in the area. There's no one who is unaffected. So there's a level of trauma in the community that hasn't really been there before. And one of the things that I'm doing in my practice is that I'm always allowing space for Mother Earth, so that she's always present. That any decisions that are made at a government level, people either sit in the chair of Mother Earth, or if they don't, that they remember that their decisions impact greatly on Mother Earth. And the other thing that Rose Sandberg and a few of, there's 4 of us, we've started doing community facilitations using a group process model, world work model, to bring out all the emotions. And it's really intense. As a facilitator, it's really hard work and incredibly valuable. but the level of rage
Mm.
that is coming out from the young people. Like, how dare you? You know, you are the generation that caused this, and what are you doing about it? So there is absolute rage. There is enormous grief. There are people falling on the floor crying in absolute grief about the animals, about the land. And I'm co-facilitating with a fellow who is a First Nations person, and it's wonderful that he's bringing in that perspective as well about the pain of Mother Earth. That it's, I don't know, Rod, I can't remember the figures, but it's the effects are meters down into the earth, something like 6 meters. It's not just superficial. So it's a really deep wounding that won't go away easily or quickly. So I'll try not to go on too much. What my concern is that now that the smoke is no longer in Melbourne, that people will forget. It impacted us city slickers because we couldn't open our doors and we couldn't go outside without masks and things like that. But now that there is no smoke, a lot of people, they run the risk of just getting on with life as normal. Mm-hmm. So we're continuing to facilitate these community groups, and with my work coaching at this leadership level, our leaders are really tired already, and it's only been a matter of weeks. They're exhausted. They're all doing bushfire relief or bushfire recovery, and yeah, there's a level of stress and anxiety and busyness and fatigue already. Mm-hmm. So I think we play a big role as IOD practitioners in supporting them and teaching them strategies and techniques of how to manage that stress, how to get energy. So thank you for listening, but that's just my experience.
Oh, Sally, it's wonderful to hear. I feel the depth in your heart, and I'm very appreciative of your sharing. And Michelle put up a question that I especially with what you just said, I think is a great one, is how do we go from emergency response and responding to the visible crises to a systematic and ongoing recognition and response? And I think it's a great question with what you're saying, because similarly in the States, I think it was last summer, well, Northern California on the coast has had huge fires. And the San Francisco Bay Area, many people weren't able to breathe, like masks, just like you're saying. So it was suddenly real, right? Instead of, it happening to other people out there. And so I think it really is a great question, and how to not have it just disappear and not have it there unless it's so acute that you literally can't breathe. So, and also as well, Michelle commented, and I agree, I love you saying you're allowing space for Mother Earth with the chair, so she's always present. I think that's really wonderful. I'm very glad to hear it. So, and do you have any ideas in your work of what you've seen as far as that transition from the emergency response and responding to the visible crisis to a systematic and ongoing recognition? Do you have any thoughts on that, just even from your recent work?
So some of the people we're coaching are the ones who are actually in charge of all that response. They're leading it. And I think at the moment we're in good hands. We've got very capable leaders. And I think that they're doing really good work. And I just reiterate what I said, that it's early days and it's enormously stressful. Like they're in we talk about a VUCA world. Well, this is VUCA world on steroids, because they're just in these highly, highly stressful situations where the need to make decisions is just firing at them all the time. So the ability to centre, connect in with themselves, and breathe. Look, it's really simple.
Yeah.
But I think that's what we have to help people to do. And Michelle, with your question, when it first happened, I was just thinking, oh my goodness, what can I do? What can I do? I'll give free coaching. I'm also a counsellor. I'll give free counselling service. I'll do this. I'll do that. And then I thought, no, just slow down and breathe and really work out. And this is the systematic thing. Work out where my value lies. And I know that I can, with others, facilitate these conversations that are really difficult and really hot. So that's what I can do. So that's my systematic sort of approach to it. So I think that's the question we all need to ask ourselves is how are we going to do this and what's the best way for each of us.
Thank you, Sally.
Love your comment about systematic approach. In about 3 years, we'll have a model because I believe the solution is in transformation of the entire country. And that can happen. We need to get the leaders, you need to get everybody together. This is a serious issue. And of course, then, I'm going to send a little humor. Keep Trump out of it.
Yes, that topic. So,
the darn guy, he says over and over and over in the United States, he says, climate change is a hoax. Okay, yeah. Continue, go on.
Yes, our own personal crazy wonderland that we get to experience here in the States. You know,
just on that, I was in a webinar recently about what we can do, and they said one of the traps we fall into is spending too much time trying to convince people who are actively opposed. And I had this sort of diagram here.
Oh, nice.
You know, that we spending too much time trying to convince and argue with and fight online with those who are actively opposed is probably not the best use of our energy and our work.
Absolutely agree.
So I think there are some traps, and you know, simple things like ordinary people having conversations and with people who they know might be neutral or not particularly supportive, and just saying things like, hey, look, I don't normally say this, or I don't normally do this, but I'm going to do this and I'm going to say this. That can have a tremendous impact on a wider circle of people around us. And I think conversations are going to be very important to know how to have those conversations with groups of leaders in rooms like Sally is, with first responders who are exhausted, with the people in our community and having coffee with us. This is all quite important, and it's quite heartening to, coming back to a wide interpretation of Michelle's question around systems. It's encouraging to hear conversations here now that are looking at big systems and that are looking at this event, but looking at the systems around that event and all of the things that are contributing. And it's wonderful to start to see some more inclusion of conversations with Indigenous peoples who have lived here for tens of thousands of years and been burning country, and doing it in a way where they look at the whole system and they look at the earth, the soil, they look at what sort of vegetation it is, they look at the moisture content at the moment, and they use different kinds of fire techniques to control, to burn ahead, and to allow weeds to be destroyed and plants that need fire to germinate and so on. So a wider conversation, a more inclusive conversation is encouraging.
So Jen, I was going to say, listening to everybody, I do a lot of strategic planning. And so like in the last year, I've begun, and I always do data gathering beforehand. So there's always like an email survey that everybody participating in the strategic planning responds to. And I come up with a draft list of questions that we customize. So I have begun asking questions about digital transformation, and I've seen it has an impact. So that they begin to think more about it, you know, like what about blockchain and artificial intelligence? And so they begin to at least have some conversation at the leadership team level. So now you guys are giving me an idea that that would be, I could, and I have one next week that I'm going to present a draft list of questions. So I'm thinking I can begin doing that with environment as well, although I don't know exactly how to word a question or two, but it's giving me an idea of, because at least it gets introduced into the conversation.
That's great. No, I really, well, as both Ann and I will talk about often, I mean, and I'm so sure we all know how powerful questions are because they direct your attention and they're going to elicit a response. So to even begin to ask them is very powerful. So, and you know, our next question is, it just goes right with what Rod was just saying, and also Sally, of how do we include Indigenous wisdom into our solutions, recognizing that life is alive and that emergent systems are here to support us as we align with supporting life. And this is something our teacher, Francis Rico, he trained in the Americas all over the place with all sorts of different Indigenous groups. And one of the things that he talks about is the recognition of one step grief, one step joy, that basically the human experience is so intertwined. And there's a great book by Martine Prechtal. I think it's called The Smell of, Anne, is it The Smell of Dust on Rain? Is that right? Or Smell of Rain? I can't hear you. Will you unmute? Yeah.
I believe it's The Smell of Rain on Dust.
Okay. And this is something like, this picture actually is from, we go to the pyramids in Teotihuacan in Mexico, outside of Mexico City, which is an ancient university that was built on a piece of ground that it was recognized that it had an upwelling of what they now call black light, of, you could say on a quantum level, it's a portal of high vibration healing energy. And these are the native dancers in the region, and they come in and they bless us during our time there with dancing that is meant to basically connect you with the land, right? And so this is the kind of thing I found for myself personally, like before I do any work, like, and similar to Sally, although I haven't actually had a chair, which I just love, but I'm always calling in and inviting in all the support on all these different levels of reality. And I'm always like, I help co-lead a journey through the mountains, which we call Journey into Eternity. And the Crow are the Indigenous tribe here that have been here for thousands of years. And we met with an elder, we gave them gifts, we asked their permission to go into the land. And just the sense of the recognition they've been very good at this for a very long time. Like what you just said, Rod, you know, like very long time. So for me, that's definitely dear to my heart, is how to include these voices as well. And I love what you had said, Sally. And, you know, part of where Ann and I live, it's the Indigenous is very, like, it's very here versus maybe in some of the cities in the States where you're not as aware of it. But any thoughts or ideas anyone has on that, I'd also, if you'd like to share, it'd be great to hear. So
I'd be interested to hear from Saima, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, or Inspiron, or there we are.
Hi, Lakshmi. Yes, and all these lovely names without faces. So if anyone would like to chime in, it'd be great to hear.
Yeah, so listen to all of you. Right now, I'm really very emotional. It's long hearing from everyone about stress, anxiety, and a lot of traumas. I feel listening to everyone like this itself is a great platform to share our feelings and thoughts and emotions, which is one way of dealing with what we are undergoing because of changing climate. And one more thing which came to my mind is about body wisdom. So when I visited one of my village last year, so there are people who knows where the water is exactly underground. They have the bodily wisdom to know how much depth you have to have a bore well to be done to know where the water is. So I've heard from my uncles that their body kind of it shoots up when they know there is water below, and they do the bore well, and exactly at what point he mentioned, more or less the water is there available. So also it leaves me with a question, do we have such people even now who knows the changes which is going to happen of even the climate change, like when birds and animals are so sensitive to the environment and the earth that we live in.
You froze, Lakshmi. I don't know if you can still. Oh wait. Give it one.
So I definitely feel like what Sally mentioned, connecting to the earth, I think will be more grounded, and maybe we'll re-invoke the connection that we have with the earth to know what the climate is going to bring about. So yeah.
Thank you, Lakshmi.
Thank you.
That's great. Well, and it's and then Salma. Yes, Salma, if I said that right. So if you want to unmute yourself, or here I can unmute you. Did that work?
Hello.
There. Yes, great.
Hi.
Hi.
Hi, this is Simon Sood and I'm from Pakistan. I'm in a university. I'm doing my job as controller of examination here. But simultaneously, I'm working on environment, and I'm doing my PhD in an area. You know, I belong to Quetta, and Quetta is a provincial headquarter of Balochistan province. And you know, this Balochistan is called half Pakistan because it covers 44% of the total land area of Pakistan. So I'm working in an area. I'm working on like flora of a forest which is called Chilgoza forest, you know, that is blue pine or Pinus gerardiana. So I'm working on the DNA barcoding of all the flora of that forest. But you know, from where this area belong, it is 40 about 400 kilometers away from this place where I am residing now. uh, uh, this area is this district is Shirani. Actually, this is world's second largest forest of Pinus gerardiana. But the problem is that the people over there, they don't have the facility of fuel, natural gas, or they don't have electricity. There's no metal road over there. So this is actual situation of on ground situation of their lives. So how can we expect without that facilities to be provided, or the mental how mental change, like not to cut that those trees of pinus, which is, you know, a near threatened species according to IUCN's red list. So how can we expect without giving them facilities at minus 15 degrees centigrade during winters? So how can we expect their mental change to not to cut those trees in a condition to safeguard their children in the severe colds. How can it be? My question is that, and I want to be facilitated.
Okay, let's see if she comes back.
I want to facilitate them. So I want your feedback to like as a helping hand for my to make me more strengthened to work for these people. Thank you.
Thank you, Salma. If you'd like to chime in on that wonderfully complex question or from your experience, I'd love to hear.
The resource I have is Noel from the Tata Institute in India. He has 5,000 people registered for his class this next year, and he would have some help for you. You can get his time because India is a sweetheart of Pakistan and vice versa.
Yeah.
Noel
I think
is
it
his
really
name.
helps to have things like this where we're from all over the world and we're sharing ideas and showing support for exactly the sort of work that you're doing, Saima. And it's good to have these connections personally as a support, I find. Thank you.
Because there's no question of female literacy over there in whole district of or girls, and people have taboos over there that not to educate their girl child, and like there's I earlier said there's no metal road, only 1 inch of metal road over there, and I got about 7 to 8 hours to get to the top of that mountain that is called Srinagar mountain, and the world largest blue pine or chilgauza forest is over there, and I'm very concerned about that forest. But people over there, they have there is a scattered population over there, and people over there, they actually they do not want to cut those trees because it is the only way of their earnings, because pine nut is very expensive here. But the thing is during
We need to hang in here.
during the cold winters.
We're having an internet problem, but the internet is going to be 1,000,000 times faster with 5G in just a couple of years for the entire world. So we'll be patient.
Salma, you just keep coming in and out, so we hear most of what you're saying, and then you're disappearing for a little bit. So it's just a little.
Actually, there's a connection problem. And where I'm working, I'm talking about that Shirani district. There's no electricity at all. I forgot to tell you that there is no electricity for the past so many years, and I don't know what to do for these people, because I spent about 10 years working in different UN agencies like UNDP, FAO, and World Food Program in these areas. But the pace of development is very slow. Pace of development is very slow. Yeah.
I was going to say one thing, Saima, is just being there, because as OD consultants, we are the instrument. So even though you don't have all the answers and the resolutions, etc., just being there, you are contributing to finding a solution. So I think if you can rest with that your very presence is making a difference.
Yes, I
And
hope so.
bringing that to us is also so important. Shining a light on those areas that need more attention, areas that we wouldn't have heard about otherwise. We thank you for that too.
Yeah, thank you. Definitely. When I hear you speak, it part of what it awakens in my heart is both a sense of awe, the sense of the complexity, and the sense of the one forest to all the forests, to just the sense of all the interconnections of all the systems. And so I agree with Anne and Rod. I'm very appreciative that you're working on that piece. And I'm very glad to hear your voice with it. It really is. And the questions, exactly, that the questions, may all the resources that you need to answer those questions come to you easily. So I very much appreciate. And one thing that Rod also said, which just in case everyone didn't see it, in our world, so much is achieved through organizations. Millions of people spend much of their lives in organizations which will be impacted by climate change will have an impact on the process as well. The organizations contain people of different views and knowledge and experience. The need for organizational learning increases in uncertain times. So with all of this, the work of OD practitioners can be so significant. So when we work in organizations, and this is something that I feel like at this time of emergence, that organizational learning, Rod, that you're saying, there is a sense that we have to learn on a larger level. The learning has to speed up. So and that's I'm very interested in how that can also be supported. So Peter, did you want to add something?
Yeah, I'll put myself on.
Okay, great.
Hi. Yeah, I've been listening to all of this with great excitement, really, I suppose. And I think there's two issues going on with the group. One is about actual causes, and the other is about effects. We've been talking mostly about effects. And I want to pose a question to you. You showed this wonderful video of interconnectedness. And if we were to intervene into the human condition on this earth, what would it be which would have the same effect as the wolves in the national park? Because that's the huge disconnect, isn't it, between humanity and the environment. And I'm also interested in this Indigenous question too, having worked with a few people. And my work is a little unusual in that I use the energy of the body to help people to understand what's most important for them. And then it's a systematic process, and it brings it together in the form of a pattern, or what we call a passion map. Now, the extraordinary thing about, and we've done thousands of these all over the place, but the most common element which inspires people or brings people alive, and this is across, cultures or ages or institutions, non-institutions, is being in nature. So here we're beings who are most inspired by being in nature, but we also destroy it. So my other perspective on that is, and you understand this, with embodiment, embodiment enables us to incorporate our body and our body's wisdom into the way we are in the world, the way we act. And my experience too is that the more embodied people become, the more they feel connected to the world, to the environment. And in my experience, most people, especially in cities, are disembodied, and they're just not connected to the environment or to nature or whatever. It's something separate. And I think we've lost the spiritual connection that Indigenous people have, that I am nature. I am nature, nature's me. So as much as we disconnect from that point of view and we see it as separate, we can't really solve the problem. Because the problem is us and us in relation to nature. So I've seen that in very practical terms working with people. And my interest is in how you take people to that point of feeling connected to nature and then start to make decisions from that place. So that's what I do in my retreats and stuff. They go to a place of deep connection, and they operate differently, they think differently, they create differently. And you know, I think we can get caught up in this head stuff. You know, it's actually the earth and our bodies that know how to solve this, not our heads. Anyway, that's my little rant. I agree with you. Eric Fromm says the problem of modern man is disconnection from nature. Now allow me to go back to our Pakistan friend. I just looked a resource for you. Her name is Natasha Singh. She is the CEO of Mesco Steel in India. We did this. We went to the top of the mountain where the people had never seen another person from the city of India. They had, and we put our steel mills in there. So if you can get her, she's very busy. Natasha Singh, Mesco Steel, a great woman, and the right way to reach her is through probably India, but the IODA network.
Thank you, Stan. And I also, Peter, I'd like to see back to you. My experience of leading retreats and taking people into the wilderness to have them reconnect, or the words I would use, to have them connect in with their inner wildness, and then they see, and I completely agree with you. What I've seen in my work, they operate differently. They see a connection in a different way. And again, Lakshmi, I'm sure Lakshmi and I have had some great chats about this. We both love embodiment wisdom. And I feel like that I lived in Maui in Hawaii for several years, and the last day that I lived there, you tend to take night flights out of there. And so it was during the day, and I went down to one of my favorite beaches, and a big turtle had crawled up on the ocean onto the sand, and they're really big turtle, and they love to surf in the waves. But this particular turtle, I saw these tourists around it, and when I got up, it had tumors all over its exposed soft bits, and what I felt when I saw that was that, because the whole time I'd lived there I'd never seen it, and it felt like such a clear message to speak for those who can't speak, to basically recognize the responsibility as a two-legged, and to give voice for those that don't have voice. So I feel like even right now, even just in this conversation together, being able to speak from our embodied wisdom, to say what we feel and see and share and bring in our feelings, and this is what it takes to be with it. And I feel moved by what you're saying, and I'm very glad to hear it. And I feel like Anne and I have been coaching each other for going on 6 years, and I know from my experience of watching Anne come more and more into feeling herself, it's like she's a brilliant person already, but it's a sense of like, I feel her brilliance connecting in with all of her, and it feels like more becomes possible then. But it takes time, right? It's not an instant overnight, buy 10 sessions and now you're embodied, right? So Anne, do you feel like in your time, like as we've been focusing more on embodiment, how do you feel that you could explain to people or invite them into why they'd want to engage in that long-term process and what they gain from it?
First, it sounds like I'm a very slow learner. Just a joke.
Okay.
Cheers. Yeah, so I was very head oriented, but I have a very strong intuitive sense. I've operated but I wasn't so conscious of it. So partnering up with Jen, she comes very much from this embodied perspective. So I think it's helped me immensely to become more whole, more me, and to be able to really recognize all the different ways I take in information, and how sensitive I am to energy. I'm a facilitator. I've been a very good facilitator, and now I can, I can understand why, because at a very unconscious level, I could feel and work with energy, but I didn't know it consciously. So I think obviously the more of us that move in this direction, the easier it will become for other people. And I think, one of the solutions moving forward, which has happened for me, is to embrace life. Just realize life is where the source is. So that's very much the movement that I've made in the last.
Thank you, Anne. And yep, Stan, I see you've got your hand raised. Or you just have it raised? But
I was a mistake. But since I'm here, don't miss reading in my Practicing Organization Development book. I don't know, edition, second or so, the person who gave us the phrase self as instrument. Robert Tannenbaum from UCLA. And he writes why that's so important and how to do it. It's a classic article. Pepperdine asked me to release all the whatever, because it was required reading at Pepperdine. So important, self as instrument.
Yeah, and Stan, there's a lot of, I just wrote an article with a colleague on self as instrument, and really incorporating this whole energy perspective and life perspective. So there's a lot of research now on this, a lot of articles out there. So I think it's great that it's becoming much more pervasive. So instead of being we're separated with subject object, that's simply not possible in a quantum world. And we are one with whoever we are working with. So there's a lot of people writing about that. So.
And you're on the cutting edge. But I'm not Stan. This is Roland Sullivan.
Sorry, it says.
And we should all just take 5 seconds of silence for Billy Albin, who was the second woman in OD at NTL, and Chris, and then Irvin Rubin, one of the other 100 original change agents from NTL, and the first Hawaiian in OD. Okay, proceed.
Thank you. So the Namvala, and again, I love where you're saying you're currently involved in wellness retreats and taking women into nature spaces. Would you like to tell us more about that? What you've seen with that, or what you've done with it?
Hi, Jen.
Hi.
I've been following the conversation with interest. I'm keeping my video off because then otherwise the internet becomes very unstable. These are wellness retreats that we are currently conducting, mainly for Black women in South Africa, and just out of a recognition that there has been a lot of trauma in different ways. And particularly for the more mature women, this trauma has been passed on from generation to generation. So it's really just about creating spaces where women can come together, they can connect, and they can begin to, in a very safe space, share stories of their lives. What we are discovering is that with the busyness of life, there's actually very little time that people can just be and connect to themselves. So we're working with as a team of facilitators and other professionals. These wellness retreats, what we try very hard is to find retreat spaces, you know, where people can also just take a walk, a little walk into a forest, a little climb onto a mountain, a walk next to the river. And we are discovering that that is increasing them to reconnect with, to reconnect to nature and actually realize that we are part of nature. And beginning to appreciate, I think the more we run this, the more we realize that we, as a community of women, we are beginning to develop a new appreciation for our natural environment, and then realizing that that natural environment is essential for our healing. So instead of just taking women from the corporate world who also live particular lives, we also taking women at community level who are kind of facing the challenges of life very, very unsupported. So it's very much also a space where women can feel the support of others. But being in those kind of tranquil, natural spaces is definitely got an added value in terms of kind of rekindling that new appreciation for nature and allowing the healing qualities of nature to begin to have an impact on us. So that's what we're trying to do with women. And we're realizing that in the South African context, and I guess elsewhere also in the world, is that often, and in this particular case, women live through one trauma after the other trauma and seldom have space to really just connect to themselves and even begin to think of, I need to on a healing process that helps, that to some extent helps me to become and to feel, even if it's just to begin to feel whole again. Yeah.
Thank
so
you.
I think that what Sally said about wholeness, or is it Anne who said about wholeness, is helping women and ourselves to start to feel whole again. Yeah.
I really a few things have come up in the chat when you're talking, and yes, the everything I'm hearing you say, and also as another thread, the connecting people actually physically, like you're saying, like taking them down to the river or having them actually connect in and remember, really, right? Like literally, like remember putting themselves back together, and then also the thread of trauma coming up. And then, as Lakshmi had said, it looks like the inside is the outside, and the outside is inside, is showing up. And I feel like there. I mean, I know in my own case is in Qigong and in the different energy practices I've been in, there's a natural point where you hit the ancestral healing, and then it seems like then you move into genocide. Like you start to move into healing these much larger fields of trauma, right? And the way that they're showing up in terms of the world, I find it very interesting, just as a subtext, what we're saying, like truly the sense that we have to heal the inner trauma because that's what's leading to the outer trauma. On the one hand, of course, we know this, but it's just really standing out to me in what I'm hearing people say. So, and I'm curious if anyone, so we have 5 more minutes, which the last 45 minutes has just flown by. So I want to make sure if anybody has anything they want to say, that they can take these last few minutes. And then also too, we're going to see about potentially being able to continue this conversation. And so you'll see an email coming out at some point from us soon. doing a survey of how we could possibly do it. But I feel like the themes I've heard us bring up tonight, I feel very inspired by them, and I can sense, I can intuit, like Lakshmi's like the body wisdom. I can feel the depth of the inner and the outer trauma being mirrored. And so being able to approach it on multiple levels to work with that trauma. So thank you so much for everything everyone said so far. And would anyone in these last closing moments, if anyone has anything they'd like to share? Anne, yes?
Just a very practical question. You or Michelle, how do we get a copy of the chat, all the resources in the chat?
So this is, once it's all like processed on my computer, I'm going to send out the webinar recording, and then also the chat text file. So yep, you'll have a copy. So yes.
Yeah, can I just pick up quickly on something you said about the turtle?
Yes.
About having a voice for those who don't have a voice. In this really, really intense group process that we were running, and it was the two women standing body to body, face to face, and one was crying, trying to tell the other one about what's needed is love, and what's really needed is this real, true love for all beings, for the ones who have a voice and the ones who don't have a voice, all beings. And then there was a baby, and someone was standing next to her who had a baby, 4 months, 5 months old. The baby took the microphone.
Oh.
And it was like it was just so amazing, because that's sort of the essence level of what connects us all. We have a responsibility for everyone to have a voice, even those like babies who are the next generation who don't have a voice yet, or the unborn ones who don't have a voice yet. We have to join together worldwide to make a difference. And I'm not saying that lightly. I really mean it. We have to find a way. And I think part of the way is through heart-filled, very connected work, and connected with each other and with the land.
Yay, thank you, Sally. My heart feels so full. It's just like, so really, thank you so much. Even just, there's just, I very much agree, and I feel deeply what you're saying, and I feel it ever more deeply. And the more I'm in the training I'm in with Francis and the shaman training, the more I feel that commitment, and the more I feel that opportunity, and being able to connect with all of you wonderful, deeply caring beings is very inspiring. So yes, we still have a few more minutes. So if anyone has anything they've been wanting to say, but we're holding off, now's the time, if you'd like to add anything else. So I see lots of well, first of all, Michelle, thank you for getting up. And then Saul.
I just wanted to say thank you, Jen, for facilitating our experiment so beautifully. And it really felt like the flow was lovely, and that we were hearing so many perspectives, which was hard. I thought it would be hard to do in 90 minutes. So I really appreciate the way that you facilitated for us. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, and again, we're experimenting, and thank you for joining us in the experiment. And I very appreciate it. So
I'm very grateful for everyone who made the time. I think it's such a powerful, important conversation. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And yes, and Salma, yes, your hand, I see it.
Thank you, Jen, and thank you everybody for listening to us and sharing. I think sharing and communication is the only tool that can make the pace a little faster.
Yeah, I agree. And Rod, I see your hand as well.
Yeah, I just came across this quote in a discussion I had recently. It's from Dr. Leela Watson, who is an Indigenous activist and academic, and she was talking about working together with others. And what she said was, if you have come here to help me, you are wasting your time. But if you have come because your liberation is bound up with mine, then let us work together.
Oh, Rod, that's the perfect closing note. That's just, yay. That makes me want to cry. That's beautiful. So thank you. Oh, yay. Thank you so much, everyone, all over the world at once, connected. Thank you. And yeah,
Thank you.
my heart's full. Thank you so much. And wishing you all a wonderful evening, a day, afternoon. And I'm sure we'll connect again in some way on this topic. So thank you. Bye.